This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and today is Wednesday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, and it's actually a big milestone. It's the 600th MTG Top 10. Because of the milestone, I decided to do something that I don't do all that often. Most of these videos look at the best, worst, or most expensive cards in the game, but this MTG Top 10 is a biographical one, where I'm going to talk about 10 Magic rules I was wrong about when I was a kid. If you started playing Magic when you were young, chances are that there are things about the game you didn't understand, especially if you were playing with other people your own age with a similar level of experience. And that was certainly the case for me. I started playing Magic in 1998 during Urza's Saga when I was 10 years old, and I grew up in a small town that didn't have a game store or anything, and there also weren't any sanctioned tournaments around either. That meant me and other preteens were trying to figure out how to play this extremely complicated game, and there was a lot that got wrong, and that's why that's the subject of this video. So let's take a look at the 10 Magic rules I was wrong about when I was a kid. At number 10, I have the fact that I thought blocking tapped a creature. This one isn't a huge deal, and I can sort of see how I got there. After all, when your cards do something that they can only do once a turn in Magic, they tend to get tapped, whether you're tapping a land for mana, using an activated ability, or attacking. So it isn't a huge leap to think that blocking would result in a creature tapping too. While overall it is a small thing, there were some big ramifications. For one thing, Royal Assassin seemed completely insane in my playgroup. For another, it meant if your creature had an activated ability and had to tap for, you had to use it before it got tapped after blocking. At number 9, I didn't really understand how the Odyssey wishes worked. I thought I could literally grab any card that I owned outside of the game when I cast one of them. This is another one where I can understand how I got there. After all, that's actually what the text on these cards say, and I suppose playing with it exactly how it's worded isn't that big of a deal, but casting a wish and literally looking through my entire collection for a card that would be useful in a situation was not exactly fun for my opponents. That's why in sanctioned play you can only use wishes to grab things from your sideboard. It's really interesting to me that this isn't something they've ever corrected. The Oracle text for these is the same, and more recent wish effects still say you can get a card you own from outside the game. At number 8, I have one that I think is pretty common, at least if you started playing in the 90s or early 2000s. Me and my friends would usually reveal the bottom card of our deck, and whoever had the higher mana value got to go first. This was a bad idea for a lot of reasons that I didn't think about at the time. For one thing, any deck that has a higher curve is going to win this a lopsided percentage of the time. For another thing, it gave both players information about their own decks and their opponents, and that really isn't something you want to give away. I'm not sure why we didn't just use a die or flip a coin or play rock, paper, scissors. Somehow, this was the method we ended up on, and I think this is what I did for like the first year I was playing Magic. At number 7, I have that I didn't know you could play more than 4 of a specific card in Limited. I played Constructed for a few years before I ever played Limited, so when I started doing drafts, it really surprised me that you can actually play more than 4 copies of a card, provided you get them in your sealed pool or draft them. This came to my attention in Odyssey Limited because there were several cards that got way better if you had multiple copies of them, and you would happily take 5 or more Flame Bursts if you got them. This is one that I know still surprises people today because anytime I draft more than 4 of something and play them in a draft video, there's at least one comment where someone is surprised that you can do that, and it makes sense that people are confused. Why would that deck construction rule be different in Limited? It isn't exactly intuitive. At number 6, I have the fact that I didn't understand how Regeneration worked. Regenerate isn't a keyword we see anymore, so I'll explain how it's supposed to work. If a card regenerates, it prevents the creature from being destroyed the next time it would be destroyed, and you tap that creature, remove all damage from it, and remove it from combat. The main thing I got wrong here is that I thought it worked against all effects that could get rid of my creature. In other words, I thought my creatures could regenerate from being sacrificed or from being removed from the game, what we call exile today. This allowed for some pretty absurd combos too, because I thought I could sacrifice a creature to one of my own effects, regenerate it, and just keep on sacrificing and regenerating. Phyrexian Ghoul plus Drudge Skeletons was my combo of choice, and obviously that doesn't actually work. I can sort of see where I got this idea because back in the day, mini cards could turn off regeneration, and they simply said that creature can't be regenerated, like Wrath of God. So if an effect that would kill my creature didn't say that, I thought that meant I could regenerate it. At number 5, I didn't understand how protection worked. A creature with protection from a color can't be targeted, enchanted, blocked, or damaged by a source of that color. I had a few things wrong here. First, I thought protection, well, protected my creature from any destroy effect of the right color, so even something like Wrath of God couldn't kill a creature with protection from white. Second, I didn't realize that a creature with protection couldn't be blocked by something of that color. This made sense to 10-year-old me, as I don't think the word protection actually does a good job of conveying how the mechanic works. If my creature isn't, well, protected from everything with the protected quality, that seems pretty strange. I also still don't think it's especially intuitive that a creature with protection just straight up can't be blocked by something of that color, although that does make a bit more sense. At number 4, we continue with keywords I misunderstood, this time with Trample. Trample, of course, makes it so a blocked creature can damage the defending player even when it gets blocked, provided lethal damage is dealt to the blocking creature. While it is certainly a nice keyword ability, the way I thought it worked was even better. I thought it worked the way Rocks and Thorn Elemental work. In other words, I thought I could just choose to do all the damage to my opponent even if they blocked my creature. Except, the way I thought it worked was even better than Rocks and the like, because I thought they could still choose to divide the damage between the player and the blocking creature. There is a second layer here too, because later, after I thought I correctly understood how it worked, there was something else I got wrong. I didn't realize that if a creature that is blocking a Trampler dies, the Trampler does all of its damage to the defending player. On number 3, I have that I didn't understand how a counterspell worked. Basically, I thought they were way better than they were. To 10-year-old me, counter didn't just mean that the spell was cancelled out. It meant that I could retaliate by then redirecting the spell however I wanted. This is another case where I can kind of understand how I got there, because counter does often mean that you not only stop something, you retaliate. This is true in things like wrestling and boxing, and more importantly, this was also true to some extent in the Pokemon games, where the move counter does extra damage depending on what move was used to damage your Pokemon. I was pretty bummed when I learned that a counterspell only stopped the spell. Of course, I quickly learned just how powerful that effect was, even when it's played correctly. At number 2, I have the fact that I thought damage to creatures was permanent. In other words, I thought that if a creature took damage in combat or from a spell, that damage stuck around. So if a 4/4 blocked a 1/1, it was now effectively a 4/3. Like a lot of people who started playing Magic in the 90s, I played the Pokemon trading card game first, and that game used damage counters to represent damage, and thus damage did stick around. I figured that this was how damage worked in Magic too, but of course it doesn't. Damage goes away at the end of each turn. And at number 1, I have what is by far my biggest mistake about Magic's rules from these early days, and that's saying something because there have been some crazy ones on here, but this one's the biggest. I didn't understand how lands and mana worked. First, I thought you just got to play all of your lands you had on turn 1. Talk about ramp. Second, I thought you could hold on to mana in between turns, so if I tapped 3 forests on one turn, I would still have 3 mana available to me on the next turn. Basically, this resulted in me thinking mana was far more readily available in Magic than it actually is. Obviously, this causes huge problems as players can start casting really strong things right away, instead of slowly ramping up mana with more powerful plays coming each turn. So that does it for this 600th MTG Top 10. What rules were you wrong about when you first started playing Magic? Let me know in the comments. If you want to catch up on the 599 other MTG Top 10s, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. If you want to make sure you catch the next 600, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me and the channel, you can do that by becoming a channel member or a patron, and you can find ways to do both of those things in the description. Thanks for watching.